Number 5 on this list is the Devil's Precipice. The Devil's Precipice is located in the village of Cozumel and is definitely one of the cooler entries on this list in my opinion. The Devil's Precipice is basically one big dangerous treasure hunt. The legend says that bandits hid some very valuable treasure here hundreds of years ago after they pulled off a massive heist. They didn't just leave it here though, but they actually cursed the treasure in the area around it so that the only people who could ever get it would be them. This was many years ago, and since then this curse has made it impossible for those who are hunting this treasure to ever actually find it. It's said that this area can be haunted by a bunch of different things, and your experience searching for this treasure differs from person to person. It's not uncommon though for those seeking this treasure to completely lose their minds. Apparently these people won't even be able to fully describe their experience after they finished, but their brains will just have gone to complete mush and they're just a shell of their former selves. Some people are lucky enough to not get this fate, but instead come face to face with some bull-like demons. The body of a human with the head of a bull. These creatures are said to guard the treasure and will stop at nothing to keep you from taking it. The luckiest people don't need to deal with either of these things though, and instead just get wildly confused and lost. When someone is approaching the treasure, it's said that a spell will be cast on them. They'll blink and then they'll find themselves many kilometers away from where they previously were. Their bodies just go into this trance-like state and they completely lose all sense of direction, just walking aimlessly through the woods. Oftentimes when they're found, they're completely covered in scratch marks and have no idea what happened to them. The lure of buried treasure is appealing, but it's clear that this is a treasure that just simply doesn't want to be found, and it's gonna do anything to stop you from getting it. Number 4 on this list is the Chiajna Monastery. Built in 1780, this monastery is located outside the capital city of Romania. Even though Romanians back in the day spent a long time building this place, it was never really used for anything. It was never properly blessed or consecrated, and because of that, it's been host to a series of unfortunate events. It is now the site of paranormal activity. Only 10 years after it was built, Turkish troops came in and raided it. During their raid, they set a fire in this building and everything burned, but the building still stood. Then several years later, the building and those who were in it got hit with a massive outbreak of the plague, and if that wasn't bad enough, the building was also hit later with a massive earthquake which caused the bell tower to collapse and the bell was drawn away by a nearby river. The fact that there's any building left standing at all is actually kind of a marvel, but due to its history, locals say it's super haunted. People warn you of going to this place because if you do, it's said that you'll get hit with some horrible luck. There have also been sightings of very sickly individuals, assumingly victims of the plague outbreak that happened many years ago. The most common paranormal experience at this place though is the ringing of the bell. The same bell that fell off so many years ago will ring out when there's a full moon in the sky. Honestly, the ringing of a bell isn't too bad and would actually be pretty cool to experience if it was a full moon, but if you do decide to go, then I recommend keeping your distance. You don't want to get a slew of bad luck following you around just so you could hear this one ghost bell. Number 3 on this list is Giamana. Giamana is currently an abandoned Romanian village that isn't doing too hot right now. Everything about this town was nice and quaint until in 1978 when its world got turned upside down. Communist ruler at the time, Nicolae Ceausescu, decided that he wanted to exploit a massive reserve for copper that was close to the village. This copper mine produced incredible amounts of copper and was extremely profitable, but it was at the expense of these villagers. Mining copper creates a lot of waste that you can't just put anywhere. Well, the dictator decided that the perfect spot was the village of Giamana. All the local villagers were ousted from their homes and sent over 100 kilometers away and given little compensation for their houses and their trouble. Then their homes and their village was swallowed up by a sea of toxic waste that's literally still here to this day. Nowadays, you can only see the top of the church poking its head out of this dangerous lake of poison. Before the villagers left, it's said that they put a curse on this land. Those with ill intentions will feel the effects of despair and loneliness forever. They'll feel like an outcast from their homes, from society, and from their family and friends. It's said that they wanted to make those who came to this place with ill intentions feel how they felt when they had to leave their homes and go to a completely new place with no warning. Make them feel like they don't belong and they're a burden on those around them. This feeling is echoed by those who visited this place, and locals say that if you do want to see this in person, to make sure that your intentions are nothing but kind and gentle. Factor in a whole other reason why you shouldn't go to this place, but it's literally because it's a giant lake of toxic waste, and I'm just guessing here, but I imagine that that's not ideal to be breathing in. Number 2 on this list is Dracula's Castle. This wouldn't be a complete list if I didn't bring up Romania's most most famous fictional character and his residence. The castle, also known as Bran Castle, is located in Transylvania, which is also in Romania. It shares a shocking resemblance to Dracula's castle in Bram Stoker's classic novel. Dracula, being a vampire, would walk around his castle walls by himself, occasionally coming out at nighttime to feast on human victims or turn them into other vampires. The character of Dracula is often associated with Vlad the Impaler, and even though Vlad didn't spend too much of his time at this castle, it's believed that this castle is the inspiration for Dracula's home. Now, I should note that this castle probably isn't actually haunted. Unlike the other entries on this list, this castle isn't known for having horrible atrocities take place inside its walls. The horrible tragedies that occurred all took place within someone's mind, and then that person wrote them on a page for all of us to envision. Therefore, in all honesty, I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit with this entry because I do think that you should go and visit Dracula's castle. There aren't actual ghosts there, so you're not risking any harm befalling you, and you get to literally walk through the walls imagining Dracula doing the same thing. They have a restaurant by this castle, they have tons of events there, and they even throw the occasional party. On Halloween, you can go there for a special event and celebrate in Dracula's literal castle. I actually don't think I can come up with a cooler place to celebrate Halloween on Earth than in Dracula's castle, but if you guys can, then comment it down below. However, I don't know what it's gonna take to beat out Dracula's literal home. So, number 1 on this list is Corvin Castle. Corvin Castle, even though it wasn't written as Dracula's castle, honestly should have been. This is a castle in Romania that has seen its fair share of horrors, and it's deeply haunted because of it. This castle has had tons of horror stories over the years. One of them says that Vlad the Impaler was actually held captive here for 7 years in the dungeons, that he lived off of rats and he impaled them after he'd eaten them, that his deep desire for blood and death rose as he was trapped between these walls. Another legend talks of 3 Turkish prisoners who were promised freedom if they dug a 100-foot deep well. The prisoners did this, and it took them over 15 years to accomplish the project, but when they were finished, were mercilessly thrown back into their cells and tortured. This castle even has a bear pit in the dungeons. It's said that those who were sentenced to death would be taken and thrown into this bear pit with a hungry bear inside and mauled to death by the animal. Horrific torture devices have been found in this castle and other dark, sadistic things that have made it one of the most haunted spots in all of Romania. Now, due to all this violence, there are several curses and hauntings that hang over this place. The first one is the well. Locals warn to never drink from that well, and also if you visit this castle, throw a coin down there and say a prayer. The 3 Turkish prisoners who dug it cursed it before they died and made it so that bad things will come to those who drink the water. The second is a monk. There was a monk who was staying at this castle who was caught eavesdropping on a conversation between 2 people. He was taken outside and bricked until he died. His spirit still roams around the halls of this building to this day, with some people reportedly having conversations with him before. Several other people have seen ghostly apparitions of those who look to be dead, and some have even seen full scenes of people being brutally tortured. Dread, despair, depression, these are all commonly reported feelings from visitors of this castle. Certainly not a spot that I recommend going if you do find yourself in Romania. Number 5 on this list is Cismaju Hotel. Located in Bucharest, this hotel was initially built over 100 years ago in 1912 and was first called the Palace Hotel. It was called this because it truly was a marvel back then and was one of the most beautiful spots in the country. The architect who built it owned the property until 1948, when it was ultimately taken by the state. This is where it was given the name that it has today. For the next 20 years or so, the hotel thrived and wasn't only just a spot for the super wealthy to vacation, but was also a spot of parliamentary meetings and other things of great importance. In 1970 though, this hotel shut down. It was simply a side effect of the communist wave that was sweeping through this part of the world, and therefore the hotel was neglected for 20 years until finally it reopened in 1990. It wasn't used as a hotel anymore though, but rather as student housing for the students enrolled in the Academy of Film and Theatre. It was during this phase when Cismaju Hotel saw the tragedy that haunts it to this day. Nelly Bajan was a young student who was staying here during her time in school. The semester had come to an end though, and it was Christmas time when the incident happened. She was one of the only students who didn't go home for Christmas and instead decided to stay in her dorm. One evening she was walking down the hall, and due to some of the lights being out, she stepped into the elevator shaft where there was no elevator waiting for her. She fell down several stories and landed at the bottom of the shaft, writhing in agony. She didn't die immediately though. In fact, it took her over 3 hours to finally die from her wounds. 3 hours where she was screaming and yelling for help, but nobody could hear her because they were all home for Christmas. Now her spirit haunts this place, and many students have reported hearing cries for help coming from nowhere. Some have seen her ghost standing at the end of the hallway, looking as if she's desperate for someone's attention. The sad thing about this is that if it would have happened at any other time when students were in the building, she likely would have been saved and never would have died at all. Just a horrible tragedy that's left its mark on this hotel for good. Number 4 on this list is the Witch's Pond. So this is a bit of a weird one. The Witch's Pond is a very small collection of water in the Boldu Cristaica forest that's said to be haunted. A few legends have come from this place. The first one, which I don't actually think is true, but I'm gonna tell you guys anyways, is that Vlad the Impaler was decapitated here. Now it could be possible that this did happen. The truth behind Vlad's death has been debated for centuries, but I find it unlikely that the killers would take him out to this pond in this forest and do it out here. The second legend, which I think is far more likely and probably did actually happen, is that a witch was killed here. An article on the subject writes, as the legend goes, 18th century villagers put a witch to death in the woods near a swampy pond in colonial-era cemetery of Equia Creek. Her name, it's said, was Edith, and her body was tossed into the water. This killing is how the pond got its name, the Witch's Pond. After she was killed, strange occurrences started happening here that couldn't be explained. It's said that the water turns blood red in the springtime, and sometimes people see a witch-like figure hovering over this bloody liquid. In other reports, there's a sacrificial altar that's spawned here, and she's standing by it waiting to sacrifice someone. The sound of bodies being thrown into the pond along with a witch's cackle can be heard ringing throughout the forest. Locals avoid this pond, and you should too. Also, if you think about it, it's just a small pond, so I don't really know why you'd be going there anyways. Number 3 on this list is Iulia Hăzdu Castle. Bogdan Hăzdu was a Romanian intellectual who was very wealthy at the end of the 18th century. Bogdan, even though he put lots of effort into his work and business, put the most of his time into his daughter. Iulia Hăzdu was his daughter, and in Bogdan's eyes could do no wrong. That's why when she passed very unexpectedly at the age of 19, Bogdan fell into a deep depression. While she was alive, she was rather remarkable. In her early teens, she knew 7 languages and had already graduated several prestigious schools for piano and vocals. She apparently excelled at her schooling as well and was set to have a very fruitful life if she hadn't been taken too early due to tuberculosis. Bogdan, as I mentioned, didn't respond super well to this and reacted by building the Iulia Hăzdu Castle. Little did he know that it was going to be haunted. Apparently he partook in spiritism sessions with people who were trained in reaching out to the dead. In these sessions he would communicate with his daughter's ghost, and she would tell him how she wanted her castle to be constructed. This is how it was built, and everything that he decided to do and tell the architect apparently came directly from the ghost of his daughter. Her ghost didn't just leave things be when this castle was finished though. In fact, she fully took up residence here. It's said that the ghost of this girl can be spotted walking throughout the halls of this castle very often. Many people report hearing the sound of a piano playing, assumingly at the hands of this ghost. What's even creepier though is that this piano playing will instantly be followed by the applause of her dead father. Also, this castle has several rooms specifically made for spiritual rituals and also an area to worship Satan. From what I've heard, the ghost here isn't particularly dangerous in nature, but it still sounds like one of the creepier spots in the whole country. Number 2 on this list is POENARI Fortress. This fortress has been riddled with death and destruction ever since it was first built. Even though in the first part of this series we talked about Dracula's castle, this is the castle where Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Dracula's character, spent a large part of his time. It's said that he saw the ruins of a fortress here at the beginning of his rule and thought that it would be a great place for a stronghold. He enslaved his enemies and worked them around the clock to revive the fortress to its former glory. Many of them died due to the extensive labor and fatigue, and those who didn't were killed by being impaled. Now, it's said that some of their spirits haunt this place, but they aren't the only ghost that still lingers here. The most notable haunting of this place is actually done by Vlad the Impaler's wife. During Vlad's reign, this fortress fell under siege by his enemies. Vlad was able to escape the castle, but his wife wasn't so lucky. The castle was falling, and rather than get captured by the oncoming army, she decided to fling herself off of the castle walls over top of a cliff. Her body fell far and dropped into a river river many hundreds of feet below. It's said that the river ran red with blood and it was nicknamed the Lady's River following this. Her ghost now forever wanders around this castle, restless. Some say that her soul can never find peace because she could never forgive her husband for abandoning her all those years ago. This is why locals say that she has it out for any married men that visit the castle. Although visiting this castle would definitely make for a fun day trip, it might just not be worth it. Number 1 on this list is Hoia-Baciu Forest. Often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, this forest is on pretty much everyone's list when it comes to the most haunted forests in the world. It all started when in 1968 a military technician took a photo of the area and captured what looked to be a UFO hovering over top of the woods. An article from My Best Place writes, after this incident, other inexplicable events soon followed, including the disappearance of a shepherd and his 200 sheep which were never found again, and the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl who later reappeared 5 years later wearing the same clothes and without having aged even 1 day. There have also been many first-hand reports from people who have entered the forest only to come out with burns, severe rashes, headaches, and a high fever which they didn't have before. Some studies have revealed higher than usual radioactivity produced by natural uranium present in the subsoil. The part in that article about burns and rashes and other things is one of the most common reports described by the people who go here. It seems that everyone who enters into these woods leaves with some sort of trauma. Most of that trauma is mental though. Feelings of despair and depression are widely documented from pretty much everyone who steps foot into this forest. All of the numerous reports, the photographs, and the general lore around this place has to make it the most haunted spot in all of Romania. Definitely not a forest that I recommend going to if you're looking to get outdoors. Number 5 on this list is Trevale Forest. Located near the Romanian city Pitești, Trevale Forest has several ghostly legends surrounding it. Some of them are old and have been rumored for centuries, whereas others have only recently gained the public's attention. Wikipedia writes, there's a legend about a maiden, daughter of a rich landowner who loved a poor servant of her father. Her father found a rich old man for her to marry, but during the wedding day, she ran with the servant in the forest. Her father found them and killed her lover and then decapitated her. It's generally accepted that the two scary things about the forest are the decapitated ghost of the bride and the people going into the forest to do satanic rituals. So that's the old legend that circulates around this forest and has been talked about for several hundred years. It's currently unknown what satanic rituals were performed here and in what time, but many assume that this forest has seen its fair share of human sacrifices and that those killed here still restlessly wander the woods to this day. The more recent legend that started some odd 30 years ago was actually from a taxi driver. It's said that a taxi driver drove a woman out to these woods as she requested him to. Then as payment for the trip was given her wedding ring. He was told to wait for her there until she was done with her business, which was in a very creepy abandoned old building right outside of the forest. As he was waiting though, he fell asleep, and when he woke up he was no longer in the same place or in the same time. It was 10 years later that he woke up in a building close to where his car was initially parked. When he went back to his car, he discovered the wedding ring attached to a finger, and heard later that the woman he drove that day killed herself 10 years prior. I can't even imagine how jarring it would be to wake up in a different place 10 years later. Like most mornings I wake up, I'm already disoriented, but that would be another level for sure. Ever since this story came out, taxi drivers around Romania don't ever want to drive here or pick someone up from this forest. A decapitated lover, human sacrifices, and a woman who took her own life and has the ability to bend time. Yeah, this forest definitely makes the list for places to avoid. Number 4 on this list is Banfi Castle. Banfi Castle is a very nice castle located in the small village of Bolinda. It's called the Banfi Castle because the Banfi family are the ones who own it. Wikipedia writes, dubbed the Versailles of Transylvania, the castle is reportedly haunted by the ghost of a young servant who paid with his life because he revealed that his mistress deceived her husband. Another variant is that the place is haunted by the ghosts of those who died in Banfi during the Second World War, when the castle was converted by the Germans into a military hospital. Legend says that there were often seen sinister shadows that seemed to be some of of the soldiers, while through walls were heard strange noises, groans, sounds of footsteps, or indistinct voices. Some personal reports from those who visited this castle before have talked about the first part of the legend. They've said that they've seen the ghost of a young man in his 20s dressed in rags and looking as if he just got beaten. This must have been the servant who revealed that secret about the mistress so many years prior. The one positive about this place is that, unlike some of the other entries on this list, it isn't life-threatening to go here. That being said, some people have said that after they visited this place, they felt an aura of bad juju surround them for a long time. Like this parasite of bad luck and bad energy that's latched on and won't let go. It's a beautiful castle on the outside, and I'm sure that it would be nice to visit, but probably not worth the risk when we're talking about ghost servants and decade-long bad luck. Number 3 on this list is RADOVAN Forest. In this particular forest, they had a pretty tragic event that happened back in the 1940s. There are multiple variations of the legend, but it all boils down to a bride who takes her own life. The first variation of the legend says that the bride came here and took her life after her husband was brutally murdered on the night of their wedding. The second one says that she took her own life before her wedding after a local business owner had their way with her without her consent. Regardless of what led to her taking her own life, she did, and it's now thought by the locals that her spirit haunts this forest and is quite dangerous. A road runs on one side of the forest, and people who drive on it are told to hit the gas pedal and get through it as fast as possible. Apparently, this woman will appear on the side of the road and through some means have a car stop. Then she'll convince the driver to come out and follow her into the woods, maybe because she's in danger or because she promised them something once they get in there. Once they've gone deep enough into the forest though, where the road is almost out of view, is when she'll strike. No one who's gotten out of their car to help this woman has ever come back from that forest and is lost to the woods forever. Also, to add some fuel to this legend, there's a lake in the forest that's claimed dozens of lives over the years. Majority of those that have perished here are men as well, which fuels the narrative of how she died. If you happen to be passing by this forest, then do as the locals suggest and gun it down the road. At the end of the day, a speeding ticket is better than a torturous death from a ghost. Number 2 on this list is the House of the Devil. This is your classic tale of a worn out and degraded home that's now haunted. Located on General Propagescu Street in Bucharest, this house has one of the strangest looking exteriors I've ever seen. It's almost 100% covered in ivy, with just tiny spots of the actual home being able to be seen. This really gives off a foreboding sensation and fuels the narrative that something sinister is happening inside the home, hidden from the public's view. A user who's nicknamed himself Dracula has written on a site detailing Romania's most haunted spots that during the interwar period, a man killed here 2 women and a 3rd woman took her own life. Also, some say that on nights with a full moon on one side of the house, you can see the number 666, a symbol of the devil, and here would live a demonic entity full of hate and anger that can be felt from afar. The number 666 showing up is why this home has been named the House of the Devil. Potentially, the demon that haunts this home possessed that one man who killed the 2 women and forced him to do it. Or maybe the sadistic actions of this man are what summoned the demon in the first place. Either way, it's abundantly clear by looking at this house from the road that it's not the sort of place you want to mess around with. People have said that they feel scared walking by the home as if somebody's watching them. Just that foreboding feeling of a dark spirit or aura in their vicinity wanting to strike. Avoid this house at all costs if you ever find yourself in Bucharest. Number 1 on this list is Cafluega Fresca Forest. Yep, that's right guys. Another forest has made the list. Something clearly needs to be up with these Romanian trees that just makes people act crazy, because this is actually getting a little bit ridiculous. Honestly, this one sounds like something directly from a movie or a video game too. Apparently the forest in question has a curse that hangs over it. This curse shouldn't be detrimental to you or to me, but those that have been cursed by this place are probably not the type of individuals that you'd want to have a run-in with. Several hundred years ago, a monastery was in this forest and it housed a bunch of monks. These monks minded their own business and didn't cause any problems for anyone, but were still senselessly murdered by an army of Turks that was raiding the area. Right before the last monk died though, he made sure to put a curse on everyone who participated in the spilling of blood of his fallen friends. The curse made it so that after these men had died, the ones who murdered the monks, their spirits came back to the forest and are forever stuck in this purgatory state in the confines of these woods. Similarly to the scene in the 3rd Lord of the Rings where Aragorn visits the ghost army in the mountains, this is kind of the same thing but in a forest forest instead. There's only one safe spot in this entire forest, and it's by a white cross that has remained from the monastery in the center of the woods. I don't like my chances against an army of the living, but I especially don't like my chances against an army of the dead. Not a forest that I recommend going if you want to make it out with your life.